Welcome to the University Press Campus Ministry Connection, where we introduce you to resources that will help you minister with greater joy, effectiveness, and depth. What motivates you about ministry right now? For some, it's the people that we minister to. For others, it's the tasks, the prayer, the Bible study, evangelism, and preaching. I trust, though, what motivates all of us most is the fact that God has invited us to participate with Him as He declares His glory among the nations, as He invites people to give their love and allegiance to Jesus, as He invites people to submit to the transforming work of the Holy Spirit so that they can become sent out as ambassadors of God's love, grace, and truth. If that motivates you, you're going to love our featured resource today. It's the book, Reviving Mission, Awakening to the Everyday Movement of God. The co-authors of the book, Linson Daniel, John Hietbrink, and Eric Rafferty, bring long decades of experience with InterVarsity Christian Fellowship's campus ministry. Linson also pastors a South Asian church in Dallas. But all of them have a lot of experience in paying attention to what God is doing in the world and saying yes, and motivating people to pay attention to what God is doing in the world, and then finding their place in God's mission, which is what we do all the time in ministry, and why I think this is going to be a fantastic book for you. Listen to the short interview with John as he begins to describe who this book was written for. John, thanks for joining us on this webinar. We're so grateful to have you here.
Thanks, Greg. It's an honor to be here.
John, of course, is one of the co-authors of Reviving Mission, a fantastic book on helping us rethink the ways that we engage, or maybe better, follow what God is already doing in the world. So, John, as you and your co-authors wrote the book, you probably had to envision audience. For whom would this book feel like great news or super practical help? Like, who would be the person you'd go, like, I am so thankful I read that book?
Yeah. Well, when Eric and Linson and I were writing, we had two folks in mind. One was someone who's like, they kind of have like a hunch, like a missional burden. Like, I think maybe God is calling me to do something, but I'm not totally sure what, and I don't really know how. So we were trying to speak to that person who's like, I think God has something for me, and I'm trying to figure that thing out and what it means to do that. And the other one was, we really tried to write it for leaders who are trying to cultivate greater missional engagement in the communities that they're leading. So whether that's folks on campus or in churches or in their neighborhoods, we think we know how difficult it is to do that as a leader and to invite our communities along into not just thinking about their own formation and their own spirituality, but actually engaging missionally in a way that feels like it's good for them and good for the places that they're trying to reach. And so it's really those two audiences: leaders trying to move their community into the mission of God, and folks who are like, I think God wants me to do something, and I'm trying to figure that thing out.
So it'd be for like the pastor who's walking around his neighborhood and just going, what could God be doing here besides what's going on inside the walls of my church? Or a campus minister who's thinking, I want my students to see their campus with new missional eyes and how they can partner with what God is doing.
Yeah, exactly right. Because I think most of us who are leading in these kinds of spaces, we know how transformational it is to actually say yes and to walk in with God into mission. Mission isn't just like good for the places we're sent to. It's good for us. It's good for the sent ones. And we know what a big deal it is for our own formation, our own transformation, to follow Jesus into what He's doing. And we want that for other people, but sometimes it's difficult to know how to do that. And hopefully the book can lay out sort of a pathway that feels accessible, but also like impactful for folks trying to make some moves in that sort of area.
And one of the things I loved is that it really helps the church or a campus ministry move from a really consumerist mindset. What am I getting out of being here? Are my needs being met? And it just invites them to go, how about you pay attention to what God might be doing? What God might be doing around us, because that's going to be actually much more satisfying.
Yeah.
Than your own felt needs. You and your co-authors describe kind of 4 moves that people need to make: encounter, explore, empower, and establish. Can you give us just a short 1-sentence description of what each of those 4 phases are?
Yeah. So those are the 4 E's of what we call them, the 4 E's of Reviving Mission. It's a pattern we really believe we didn't create it. It was more like something as we just looked at the Bible and studied it and interviewed a lot of people, practitioners from around the world. We kept seeing these themes sort of emerge, and it felt like it was something we discovered. So, and the pattern is basically, first, all mission starts with encounter with God. God is the origin and source. Encounter with God is the origin of mission. Once we encounter God, as we encounter God, we recognize, oh, God is doing something around me. God is already at work. And so our invitation is to explore what he's already doing. Usually what he's doing in a place means he's doing something in a person or in a people. And so our the 30 is about empowering. We both need to be empowered by the Spirit of God, but then because God has freely empowered us, we can freely empower others to help them connect and encounter God for themselves and walk into the calling that He has for them. And then the final E is establish. Throughout history, God's people have always established habits and habitats, rhythms of daily life that help them pay attention to what God is doing, and then habitats where people and communities can flourish. And so encounter God, explore what he's doing, empower the people that he connects us with, and then establish rhythms, habits, and habitats around that thing to sustain it for the sake of the long haul and long-term fruitfulness of what God is doing in a place.
That's fantastic. So that's encounter, explore, empower, and establish. One of the things, as I was reading through the book, that I appreciated was in each of those phases, you say it really begins with who God is.
That's right.
And so it's not just at the encounter phase, but at every one of those phases, you need to know who God is. Um, is there one thing about who God is as you were writing that you thought, I wasn't expecting this, or I really hope people capture this is a truth about who God is that I think we've often lost?
Yeah, I imagine this is true in any writing process. You don't start with the book at the beginning. You learn a lot along the way. And one of those places, honestly, Greg, was in the Explorer, when we're talking about exploring what God is doing, we were so struck that God isn't just present in the present.
Mm.
Right? God is around us and moving now, to be sure, but God is the one who was and is to come. God's work has been going a long time in the past when I was not even aware of it, in places and in people. And God also has a future uh, that he is working toward. And he's not just here now, he has been here and he will be here. And there's something about locating ourselves and our whatever sort of feeble steps of faith that we take in a big, big story of God that actually relieves a lot of pressure from us, expands our vision to be able to see what God is doing, and enables us to play our part, our small little part, with joy and wonder and those kinds of things. And so that was like, it was a really fun moment. We came across that idea when we were like playing around with some of the stuff down in Dallas at Linson's church, and it was like, oh my goodness, God does that all the time. Jesus does that over and over and over again. Paul does that in some of his missionary journeys. And it feels like that's a great invitation for us as folks who are trying to say yes to mission, to say, what has God already done in this place? What is God going to do? What does he want to do in the future? And how do those things inform the present?
Right. There is something amazing about realizing God is really saying, come do this with me. I already started.
That's right.
I'm to invite you to do it here. I will finish it. You do not need to worry.
That's right.
I'm
It's
making
so
all things new.
Yep.
You just that's fantastic. The 4 E's, encounter, explore, empower, and establish, are also grounded in how we need to live, right? That there are postures of who we are that have to change as we try to revive mission. Was there one posture or one change that you hope people really grab a hold of? I
Yeah.
realize all of them are necessary, but is there one
Sure.
that you're just like,
I think there's one that I found to be like personally resonant through the process of writing the book. And we tie encounter with God as the shift from cynicism to wonder.
mhm,
And man, Greg, there's so much to be cynical about
yeah,
in our day, and so many things that are counterfeit and are not of the kingdom. And God is profoundly at work, even in the midst of
mhm,
disruptions that we're experiencing. And there's this great phrase, I didn't come up with it, but I think with some of the things we're seeing on campus right now, and actually in the broader faith community, it feels like, oh, is God reviving some things right now? Is that a drop of rain falling? And there's this phrase that when it comes to reports of revival or outpouring or renewal, I'd rather be gullible than cynical.
mhm,
Right?
yeah,
I find myself pretty cynical about a lot of things a lot of times because we've been trained to do that. There's a lot of things to be cynical about. There's so many counterfeit expressions out there. But I think in this kind of day, God has been cultivating a fresh sense of wonder. And we watch it all the time in my role on campus, in our roles on campus. I imagine pastors can testify to the ways like, I did not recognize that God was moving in that person. or in that community or in that small group. And then all of a sudden there he was. And when we see God in that kind of way, despite all the craziness and the chaos, man, that opens us up to say, oh, where else might God be moving in a surprising place or with a surprising person or in a place like in a situation I wasn't expecting it. And when we start to look for God in that kind of way, it's like balm to my cynical heart,
Mhm.
I would say. And so that in particular, that transformation from being cynical to being filled with wonder and open to the beautiful things that God is doing, that's been a really good thing for me.
That's great. I was struck in the explore stage as you also challenge people to think about curiosity rather than contempt,
Mm.
and how critical that is in a highly polarized world that, in fact, we can't see people and can't see situations and how God might be moving if we view them with contempt. I often think about a Canadian urban missiologist once said, why is it that when we look at the brokenness of the world, we only see promiscuity rather than loneliness?
Oh,
Right. And I just, for decades, that's just has sat with me as moving from contempt to curiosity,
that's right.
and then be able to go,
Exactly.
okay, the gospel has a space here.
Amen.
Um, Maybe last question, let me ask you is, you all wrote this book with the hope of a leader who might be walking around his neighborhood or her neighborhood and saying, I wonder what God is doing. I want to be part of what God is doing. You also said, pastors and ministers might be thinking, I have students or elders that I would love to begin to invite them, or small group leaders at my church, to think about how they could become more missional. How can you imagine them using this book and the resources that your team has put together?
Yeah. Well, if I'm honest, it really was a primary audience for us. And we really, in a lot of ways, tried to distill so much of the stuff that we've learned and tried in an intervarsity context that we think remains true in the collegiate world, but also could be a real gift to folks in that kind of space. And so I think our dream is that we can imagine like staff sitting down to disciple an emerging leader, right? Or a young, like a first year, second year student on campus who's like tasted of God's transformation in their own life and is thinking like, what about all the people on my floor or in my academic discipline or on my sports team or in this other organization that I'm a part of? What might could God use me
Yeah.
to somehow minister to them? This is a fantastic resource for a staff or a leader to sit down with someone who's kind of growing in that sense of missional hunch. I maybe think God has something for me. I also think it could be a great space for I think about like folks that are getting ready to take their first steps into leadership as small group leaders. Boy, to root small group leaders, small group Bible study leaders in a sense of like, what is God doing here? How do I encounter God for myself? How do I explore for his activity? How do I empower other people to be able to lead? It's great in that space. And then I would also say with like leadership teams of students that are already functioning in this kind of way, because I think, you and I both know mission is hard. Saying yes to Jesus' invitation to mission can be delightful and it can be kind of exhausting sometimes. And I think we tried to write the book in a way that would feel not like get out there and go get them, but actually full of buoyancy and life and joy and hopefulness. Because there are like challenges and risks that God calls us to take, but man, his presence is with us in that space. And actually, it's part of why we called it a reviving mission, not a like responsible mission or like one filled with ought and should, but actually a mission from God that's a good invitation for us to be revived, even as we participate in the revival that he's bringing through us. And so, yeah, so those are a few potential use cases.
Yeah. Great. And what leader, what pastor doesn't look at their flock? What campus minister doesn't look at the leaders or emerging leaders think, I'd love to invite you to something that gives joy and life to you,
Amen.
that allows you to participate with what God is doing in the world. That's the best kind of discipleship in the long run. John, thanks so much for joining us, and thanks for writing the book with your co-authors. The book is Reviving Mission.
Awesome. Thanks, Greg.
As I was talking to John, I was so struck by his joy and his passion and his deep conviction that mission is good, not just for the people we're reaching out to, but for the people participating in the mission. And if you want tools to help call your student leaders or the elders from your church to engage in Reviving Mission, you can go to revivingmission.org, where the co-authors have put together a workbook as well as a devotional that will help everybody who uses them Pay attention to who God is, what God is doing, and how God invites us to participate with him. I also think, as you might be thinking, that would be a great book, but the ministry I'm in has so many other demands, it's hard to keep people focused on that. One resource that might be helpful for you is the book The Mission Always Wins by Todd Bolsinger, the author of the best-selling book Canoeing the Mountains. In this volume in the Practicing Change series, they're thin and super helpful, Todd helps us pay attention to all of the competing demands that our organizations, ministries, and chapters and fellowships may be experiencing, and then offers us the tools that we need to call everybody, particularly the leaders, to focus all of our activities on the mission. If you've ever thought we would do a lot more evangelism and mission if we weren't so distracted by everything else we've been invited to, Todd's book, The Mission Always Wins, could be a great help to you. I know for a lot of us, the first step in engaging people in mission is helping them share their faith more comfortably, more naturally, and less awkwardly. When I think about doing that, the book I always turn to is Out of the Salt Shaker and Into the World by Rebecca Manley Pippert. Becky's book is fantastic for two main reasons, I think. One, it points us so directly to the person of Jesus that it's one of my favorite ways of introducing people to Jesus. You learn what it means to follow him and to be attentive to him. The other reason I love Becky's book is it challenges us to listen to what the Spirit is doing, to listen to the other person that we're talking to carefully, and to listen to the ways that God has shaped us to share our faith in comfortable, gracious, compassionate, and clear ways. If you want to help people in your fellowship or church do evangelism, engage in evangelism, then I can't think of a better book to inspire them than Becky's book, which has sold over 500,000 copies. Finally, some of us, if we want to engage in mission, need to pay attention to what God is doing in the world and have a vision for what God could do if God's people would live like kingdom agents wherever they were. Don Everts, who has campus ministry experience and is now a pastor, wrote the book, The Hopeful Neighborhood, What Happens When Christians Pursue the Common Good. And in it, he casts a vision for what it would be like if we really were salt and light in the places that we are called to be. While it's mostly written in a church context, all of us in campus ministry can easily translate what flourishing communities could look like on campus as well as around us. I hope those resources, as well as the book Reviving Mission, equip you to better serve the campus ministries or the churches that you're in right now. All of them, of course, can be found at ivpress.com, and you can use your campus ministry discount there, or at your favorite Christian bookstore. I love Hearts and Minds Books in Dallastown, Pennsylvania, or at your favorite online retailer. Thanks for joining us for the InterVarsity Press Campus Ministry Connection. Look forward to seeing you soon.